Hey everybody, thanks for the patience as we were getting set up here. This is Dan Reeser, and I'm joined by my friend and coworker Robinson. We'll do some quick introductions after I kind of set things up, but we're here today for one of the first Wormhole crowdcasts that we've hosted, and we really wanted to get kind of everyone started with a bit of the basics as far as what Wormhole is building, kind of the space that we're building in, which is under this kind of umbrella of blockchain interoperability. So we're going to use this as kind of an introductory, definitely consider it a non-technical discussion around blockchain interoperability, what you can actually use this tech for, some background on just trade-offs and things to consider with building protocols like this. And then we'll give a little bit of predictions and commentary on where the interoperability space is headed in general. Robinson, if you want to go with a little bit of an intro, I'll do the same, and then we can get started.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Before getting into that, I'm really excited as well. I mean, we've been building Wormhole now for 2+ years, and there's so much to it, and it's this foundation of kind of all Web3, all of crypto, if you will. So I'm really excited about doing these more, kind of educating and talking more about what we've been doing over the past number of years here to build kind of what we have today, which is Wormhole. But before getting into the actual presentation, I'll take a step back. My name is Robinson. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at the Wormhole Foundation. So focus on everything kind of product, BD, strategy related. I've been in the blockchain space for over 2 years now. Was at DoorDash, for those who aren't familiar. It's a third-party food delivery company. Was there for 4+ years, and then a number of startups before that. So really excited to be chatting with everyone today.
Cool. And then I'm Dan Reeser. I'm the COO at Wormhole Foundation. Been here for 8 or 9 months. Actually previously worked with Robinson at a prior startup in the Polkadot ecosystem. So I was there for about 4 years, been in crypto for it'll be 6, I believe, in May, and spent some time in healthcare before this. So mostly in my career, I've been working on marketing, some BD operations. So my role now is kind of spanning a lot of like marketing, community, and internal operations at the foundation. So has been a blast working with Robinson so far at the foundation, and we're scaling up the team. So if anyone listening right now is a highly talented individual in basically any function on a crypto team, we're hiring. So feel free to ping us on Twitter or any of the other channels that we're live on. Let's go ahead and get started then. Let me pull up the chat. I wanted to see if anyone in the crowd has a guess as far as what I'm showing on the screen right now. Any guesses in the chat? Besides the coral reef. All right.
It is. These are all not correct though.
They're not. Yeah, they're not wrong. I'm referring to this this line. Almost. So this is a underwater fiber optic cable that runs under the ocean, connecting various parts of the world's internet. And as we were doing the research for this presentation, it's actually a really interesting slide. All these blue and orange lines here are all the fiber optic cables that connect the different continents around the world. And the orange is actually just Facebook, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, it's pretty mind-blowing.
That's insane.
The infrastructure these people have laid across the ocean. So yeah, at the bottom, it's 1.2 million kilometers, 750,000 miles for those who use miles. But this is all what connects the entire cross-continental internet that we all enjoy, have been enjoying for the last 20, 30 years. But this actually has a history prior to fiber optic cable. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this slide, but even going back to the mid-1800s, there were people laying lines between areas in Western Europe to allow for telegraph messages to be sent under the ocean between 2 different countries. And then this evolved over time into various levels of improving technology, which led into the 80s of the first fiber optic cables being laid between different continents. And then in the 90s and the 2000s, as the internet boom happened, all this was kind of improved in terms of speed and capacity, connecting all the continents of the world into the internet that we know today. And the reason why I'm painting this picture is just to have everyone, stop and remember that the internet that we enjoy today, all the applications, all the companies, the multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar companies that now exist on the internet are only possible because the internet was connected by people who were actually laying those lines in the ocean back in the 1980s. It took 30 years for those people to get to the point of where we were in the early 2000s, 2010s of the Facebooks and the YouTubes of the world. But there was a lot of work that was done to get to the point where we are now. And there's a lot of parallels between that and what we're doing in the crypto space in terms of interoperability. And if you're in this call, if you're watching this video, this probably isn't the first time that you've heard about crypto. You've probably done your research on Bitcoin and on Ethereum, and you probably understand there's a need to connect these blockchains together. But there's more and more growth evident in the industry that's showing us that connectivity between blockchains is inevitable, and it's a needed characteristic in the industry in order to enable a lot of the businesses and use cases that we all imagine coming very soon. This is a chart showing the number of active blockchains that have been launched since 2013, and clearly this is a up and to the right chart. And very similarly, the ratio of decentralized exchange volume to centralized exchange volume is also up and to the right. So everything's moving on chain. We've seen this with Coinbase launching their L2 base. There's a lot of rumors around other exchanges launching L2 sometime soon. So more and more activities coming on chain, which is really exciting for all of us who work on protocol teams. This may be apparent and obvious at this point, but just to define what blockchain interoperability is, it's enabling isolated blockchain networks to communicate data between each other. So any form of data can be sent from one chain to another using what we call a messaging protocol, and we'll get into that in a little bit here. Blockchain interoperability, it enables quite a few things for various players within the industry. So first and foremost, user growth and TVL volume growth are two reasons why teams who are running layer 1 or layer 2 blockchains or applications on those chains need to work with teams like Wormhole to grow their business. And then scalability it's a similar trait of what I just got into around growth. But if you're an application and you are launching on, let's say, Base, but you want to also attract users on chains like Ethereum or on Arbitrum or Optimism, you will also want to do multiple deployments. So Wormhole helps you scale and connect all of your deployments across these different chains. There's teams like Pike, there's teams like Synonym who are actually building now natively multi-chain. So these are examples to look into if you're interested in kind of the next generation of multi-chain applications. And I just talked about new use cases. Those are two examples of new use cases, but plenty of other use cases we're seeing come through that are only enabled because of this multi-chain interoperability that is being enabled by these protocols. So Robinson, I'll hand it over to you just to walk people through this interoperability stack, just to get a feel for where Wormhole is in this overall picture, and then get a feel for some of the applications built within kind of the Wormhole ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, some of you may have been in this space for a while. Some of you are new to the space, but in general, I know crypto's been around for a little bit, but a lot of the actual building, the technology, et cetera, is still fairly new. And I think what helps when you're building kind of this cutting edge technology are mental models. So that's why we kind of started out with this idea, not the idea, the fact that, that how the internet started around laying cables underwater, that real laborious, longer term process that ultimately decades later gave us on our phones, delivery to our door or a car to our door or any of the games, social media you play, et cetera, right? That's that long period of time. And so what we're building now is kind of like a paradigm shift from that, right? It's this new cutting edge technology. And what's important is to be able to have these mental models to help us understand how everything works together. And I think this is a great kind of mental model, if you will, or visual to understand how the interoperability stack works. Because we have blockchains today, and we all might be familiar with an Ethereum, a Solana, some of these like Arbitrum, et cetera, and apps can build on top of that, right? That's a mental model that we now know, we understand in general, right? Some of you may be new and just learning that, which is fine too. For interoperability, I think it's a bit, it's not as well known. And so I think this lends itself as a really helpful mental model for, how we view the stack and where Wormhole in particular fits in, right? So you can see at the bottom, we have this concept of the messaging layer. So Wormhole is an example. Another example of a interoperability protocol is Axelar. And now you can think about this almost as these cables underwater, right? It's what's connecting all of these blockchains together. So that's this kind of core layer at the bottom. On top of that, and I think something to call out, a lot of people get this bottom layer and the one on top of them confused. But on top of that, you have this idea of building applications. A lot of the applications people are really familiar with to start are token bridging, right? Like I'm sure most of us on here have bridged tokens at some point. You can even bridge NFTs. And I think a lot of people latch onto that idea because that's what you're experiencing as the user. But I think it's really important to separate them because Wormhole is actually not a token bridge. Wormhole is an interoperability protocol. It powers any sort of cross-chain application on top of it, connects 30 plus blockchains. And some of the ones that are really popular today are, Mayan Swap, Squid, Portal, USDC has its own kind of bridge, if you will. And the idea behind these is that these are what the user will interact with to send tokens from one chain A to chain B. And underneath what makes that possible is something like Wormhole, this messaging layer, this interoperability layer. And as we go further up the stack, you can use essentially as a user, you can use the token bridging and liquidity layer. You can also use the aggregation layer. So what's happening is that there are all these different chains. There's so many. Dan showed this kind of chart going up and to the right. One of the few up and to the right only charts we see, but it's definitely only up and to the right. There's going to be more and more and more blockchains. So you'll have a few providers connecting all these blockchains all the way at the base level. Then you'll have a bunch of different apps that come along. Maybe some of you have used Portal. Maybe some of you have used MindSwap. But the aggregators like Li-Fi and Socket, what they do is they aggregate the layer below them. So they aggregate all of these different token bridges. And the idea is that as a user, you're going to go to some desktop website, right? Or hopefully eventually more on mobile. And they will pick the best, the cheapest and most efficient route for you if you were to send an asset from chain A to chain B. So we have this kind of what we call this aggregation layer. And then you go a step higher and we get what most of us probably use on a regular basis, which are a lot of the wallets and more of the application layer. You can even throw in some dApps in here, et cetera. And what will happen is that this whole stack will kind of be aggregated and expose itself in the wallets that if you do use crypto or you do things on chain, you've likely used some sort of wallet. So more of this kind of stack, or all of this stack, will kind of be combined in the background and then exposed to you as the user in the wallet. So you can easily take Solana, right, to Ethereum. Solana doesn't exist on Ethereum, but you would be able to do that within your wallet, all because of this kind of infrastructure that we're laying. I'll stop there, Dan. I don't know if you have any additional comment.
Yeah, I think one aspect of this slide that we should kind of focus in on a little bit more is the USDC section here on the second line and the token bridging part. If you can read that below the USDC logo, it says CCTP, which is cross-chain transfer protocol. This is a very, very prominent technology now in the industry, especially if you're working on a protocol team. If you haven't heard about it, CCTP is essentially a token bridging protocol that the Circle team actually built and operates themselves. Yeah. And the reason why they built this is there was a problem that they needed to solve, which was people were sending USDC to all these different blockchains using bridging protocols, and those, because USDC needed to be wrapped in order to be sent to other chains, there were all different types of USDCs making their way to different blockchains. So just to give an example, let's say you're on Arbitrum and someone sends USDC from Solana to Arbitrum, from Aptos to Arbitrum, and from, let's say, what's another one, like Cosmos to Arbitrum. Cosmos. Yeah. These would be 3 different types of USDCs, all Solana wrapped USDC, Cosmos wrapped USDC, and Aptos wrapped USDC. So if you're a user, it's a pain because you get this form of wrapped USDC, and then you're trying to find out, like, okay, what can I do with this USDC? Could I use a DEX on this chain? But then you realize that there's no liquidity for that. There's no pool for that type of USDC. So it's a pain for the users. And then if you're an application, which are a lot of the people who we work with, we work closely with developers building apps. If you're an application and you're running a DEX, you only want one type of USDC so that every pair on your DEX is just, ETH with USDC or Aptos with USDC, not 3 different types or 10 different types of USDC. So it's a big headache for application developers. So USDC built CCTP so that they could launch this protocol on various chains, and they're slowly rolling this product out to different chains. And this allows them to mint a native form of USDC on whatever chain that CCTP is live on. So CCTP is operating at this token bridging level. And the cool thing is Wormhole is actually working really closely with the Circle team and the CCTP protocol to enable additional use cases outside of just a transfer of tokens. Because of this messaging layer, it allows us to add specific kind of directions as far as after you send USDC from X chain to Y chain, do X, Y, and Z. It's like pre-programming this to take an action when it reaches its destination. So I don't know, Robinson, if you have any examples of use cases that are enabled by like Wormhole being able to add programmability to USDC, but a lot of cool things that developers are working with in that regard.
Yeah, I think without getting too in the weeds on the technicalities here, like if you're able to do things more programmatically, you can send things cross-chain and do an action, right? So instead of send it to a wallet cross-chain, right? We may have all experienced, some of us maybe not, but sending to another wallet. Maybe you send to a centralized exchange, or you send something to a centralized exchange to your hot wallet, your MetaMask, right? Your backpack or something like that. What you could do theoretically in this situation, or actually not theoretically, we're doing this today, you can send that, and instead of it just landing in your wallet, it will also do another action, right? So whether that's send it cross-chain and deposit in a borrow lend, send it cross-chain and pay for an NFT. So there's a lot of different things you can do with this kind of programmatic money almost, which is really exciting. And we're starting to see new applications come out with this functionality today. Like Dan mentioned a few, but there's tens, if not hundreds now building on Wormhole.
And then we will move on from this slide, but one last thing I wanted to mention on the aggregation layer. Robinson explained this. It's basically aggregating different routes together that are provided by various token bridges that are on the level below it. Just an analogy, this app would be really nice to have if you're ever like in a busy area. If it's raining, it's hard to get, like, let's say an Uber. Imagine an app where you could just call a ride, and whichever Lyft, Uber, or a taxi was closest to you and fastest and cheapest would be recommended to you. It's aggregating Uber, Lyft, and taxis all in that area at a time where you really need it. That is an aggregation example. This is in interoperability. This is the exact thing happening. You will say, I want to send USDC from Solana to Ethereum, and that aggregator will realize that Wormhole has the best route for that, and it will recommend Wormhole, and at the bottom it'll say like powered by Wormhole. But there could be another example where Axelar has the best route, and it'll do the back end kind of calculations or whatever you want to call it, and it'll come up and say, okay, from this chain to this chain, Axelar has the best, so here's your route, and then it'll say powered by Axelar. So it's aggregating these different routes for you and giving you the best possible way to send a token or anything from chain A to chain B.
Love it. Yeah. So as we kind of understand the stack, right? We understand that the base layer is really what's happening is we're sending data back and forth between blockchains. Sometimes I actually think about it almost as like a translation layer. Like each blockchain literally speaks a different language, and you need something to translate between the two. And so that's usually in the form of data, or we oftentimes call them messages. This right here is a chart of how many messages have gone through the Wormhole platform. This is actually outdated. It's significantly more than this now. But the idea behind this is that every message is a piece of data, which is programming an app. Usually that app is sending tokens. That app could be sending instructions. It could be sending, any sort of directions, right? Any action when you press, you want to do something, this is coordinating in the background. And so it's really cool to see, we're very close to obviously 1 billion, but this all comes from all the applications building on top of Wormhole, right? Like, again, reminding that we all have probably done a token transfer. If you haven't, it's, quite a popular use case here. And that's some of what's generating a lot of this. We'll also have oracles. So there's a really popular oracle called Pith. Maybe some of you are familiar, but Pith relies on Wormhole messages to send data and price feeds cross chain. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few slides here.
Yep. Today, just to correct the slide, it's 926 million messages, and it's January 24th, 2024. So we're getting close to 1 billion messages.
When 1 billion?
Soon. You want to walk through this one?
I think when we think about the way I like to think about like interoperability protocols, again, remember the mental model I'm using is really this base layer. It's the thing coordinating everything in the background, even communication with the blockchains. We almost have a duty, or as the foundation behind the protocol. The protocol actually has a duty, and we do as well, to make it as secure as possible. Because what ultimately happens is, as a user, myself, maybe some of you, are going to use applications. Eventually, you might not even know. Actually, today, you're going to use applications and not even know you're using Wormhole in the background. For instance, Uniswap. If you're voting on Uniswap on any other chain but Ethereum, I think there's 5 chains today where Wormhole powers the governance, but we're doing that in the background. We're helping these kind of different deployments, these Uniswaps on different chains, communicate governance votes with one another. So it just draws this like focus and importance to security. And so that's why, at Wormhole, that's probably one of the number one things, if not the number one thing we focus on. The other one is decentralization. Why are we here if not, for prioritizing decentralization? So Wormhole today, we believe, is sufficiently decentralized. Uniswap, one of the biggest protocols in the space, actually ran a third-party assessment and did a 4 to 5 month technical deep dive, unbiased, and went into kind of the security and decentralization of all the bridges and provided kind of a rating for these. And Wormhole was the only one unconditionally approved to support these Uniswap deployments. So we oftentimes use that as a testament to the work we, over these past 2+ years, have put into decentralization. But at the end of the day, we keep talking about this thing that's securing all these applications in the background. If a few people can take over the network, that's not really that secure, is it? That's not really that decentralized. So we want to make sure that, no one can stop the network, unless, of course, you go through proper governance and there's, various voting, et cetera. But decentralization, what I'm trying to say here, is extremely important for this kind of backbone or foundation of Web3. These last ones I'll go through quickly. User experience, right? We want to make sure that the user largely doesn't even know they're using Wormhole sometimes, right? We're just coordinating everything, so you don't have to care about what chain you're on. You can just use an application, whether you're on Solana, whether you're on Berachain, whether you're on Arbitrum, whether you're on a chain in Polkadot ecosystem, right? You don't have to care. You're just going to use an application. Open source, this is one that I think gets overlooked, excuse me. It's almost just as important as decentralization, if not as important. We build in the open. This is a public utility for the most part, right? This is something that everyone uses, and it's important that they know what they're using. They can see if they wanted to, what the code looks like, and they can verify things for themselves. And so this is kind of part of part of Wormhole Foundation's ethos to make sure that we're always building in the open, the code's always verifiable, and we are truly that Web3 utility. And the last one, scalability. Oh, go ahead.
Real quick. Just to touch on decentralization and open source, these are things that are often underappreciated and only important when things go wrong. So the other thing to remember here is that these are easy to ignore, and it's much easier to build protocols that are not decentralized and are not open source. It's much easier. Decentralizing requires a lot of coordination of different entities, running nodes. If you look at Wormhole, we have 19 guardians. Axelar has a lot of validators who run the blockchain that runs Axelar. Some of the other people in the interoperability space are, positioning themselves as a decentralized, trustless protocol, when in reality, they're a 2 of 2 multisig that can be censored. It's just risky for users to use something that's not decentralized and not open source. With Wormhole and Axelar as well, the code's all open source. So like Robinson said, any developer can go in and verify everything that we're saying. Every product that we launch is open source, so people can go in, audit, check things before starting to use them. If it's centralized, of course, it's like working with Facebook. The code is closed source. You don't know really what's going on behind the scenes. There could be backdoors. You never know. You never know what's going on. So I just wanted to highlight decentralization and open source because our team takes this very seriously. We are very kind of, we live by the crypto values. We live by the crypto ethos. Our team is not willing to ship things that aren't open source and aren't decentralized. So very important 2 qualities for Wormhole.
I'm glad we zoomed in on that because it is so important. And, the space it's really hard sometimes to find the truth. I mean, I'm sure some of you on here have been in crypto Twitter, and there's a lot of language and things that are said, and it can be distracting and you can believe certain things, but it's always important to kind of double check and make sure you understand how decentralized, how trustless something is. Last one here, and then we can move on to scalability. I think, this term can be overused sometimes, but the way I think about this one is it's our job to be everywhere, right? We want to be like those lines, the coral that go across the bottom of the ocean. I know some people were saying coral reef, but we want to be like those lines, right? We want to connect different continents, in this case, different blockchains. And so we're going to continue to expand the network. I see some people talking about Parachain in there. That's definitely a great chain. We'll as more chains go live, we'll continue to try and be there. We will be there to make sure that users have access, universally.